Hi, Sean here, one half of Sean and Kiara. We are the co-creators of Lucy in the Sky, a graphic novel for middle grade readers published by First Second. Our second graphic novel, Rhiannon, will be out in October of 2025. If you like the things we do, please consider supporting us by becoming a paying member of our Patreon site for $4 a month. And if you enjoy videos like this, hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it'll help us build this channel. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
The black car makes an appearance again, attempting once more to run them down. They come to the address that Calculus has called a few times, and Herge based this off of a chateau in Nyon, an actual chateau in Nyon. There's a photograph you can find online of the actual place. Nobody seems to be answering the door. Tintin finds a way in from the back, and while they're in there, they discover Calculus's umbrella, the umbrella will become a running motif in the story from this point. And they see that there's been wine and 2 glasses have been set out. Whoever was there was expecting a visitor. Tintin discovers a book has been left open. And we see the book is German Research in World War II by Leslie E. Simon. And he opens it up to a page showing a large device that looks very similar to the smaller version that Calculus had in his workshop. And so they wonder if this is the machine that Calculus has been working on. In fact, this apparently was a real book that Herge had gotten a hold of, or that he had, and he changed the cover illustration to have the V2 rocket, and this photograph here, along with the caption, he reproduced faithfully. It was by an English author, and so the caption is in English. This wasn't translated for the English edition. He just copied it out as it appeared in the actual book. As Haddock is plugging in the light so that they can see, he inadvertently plugs in the radio, and so they're startled. Another nice last panel here. Somebody off panel saying, "Ha ha ha, in fact, you've put your hand right into the lion's mouth." And they find that it is actually the radio that has been plugged in and has come on. As Tintin goes to turn off the radio, he finds that the same brand of cigarettes, somebody has been smoking that same brand of cigarettes that he found in Calculus's pursuer's pocket. And hearing some clanging on the radiator, they go to investigate down into the cellar. Snowy, tripping himself up with his umbrella, causing a big avalanche of stuff coming down the stairs. The wonderful panel there. Of course, one of the buckets lands on Haddock's head. And here we find the owner of the house, Professor Topolino, which translates from Italian into Little Mouse, I believe. This was apparently may have been a reference that Herge was making to Mickey Mouse, which at the time, the 1950s, and Disney would have been at the height of his popularity in America. And Professor Topolino is enraged that he's been tied up and thrown into the coal bin of his own house. He tells Haddock and Tintin that it was Calculus who had done this to him. Of course, they can't believe that Calculus would have done such a thing. But then he relates his story, and they realize that it was somebody impersonating Calculus. Tintin shows him the cigarettes, and the professor says it's the brand that Boris smokes. As a servant of his smokes these cigarettes. Beginning to put the pieces together. Captain Haddock is looking longingly at the bottle of wine, as Tintin and Topolino are having their conversation, he tries to make he tries to bring in the bottle of wine into the topic to suggest that he wants a drink. This panel here of him looking at it with his tongue out. Finally, they show him a photograph of Calculus, and Topolino says, "Oh, I've never seen him. Who is he?" So they realize that whoever had come to Topolino's house had tied him up, put him in the basement, and then waited for Calculus to come. And apparently has now kidnapped Calculus, as his umbrella was still there, had been left behind. And as they come to this realization, the chateau explodes. And the black car driving away, up she goes. That's got rid of the whole bunch at one stroke. Some nice fire trucks coming onto the scene here. And as they pull Captain Haddock out of the wreckage, we see that he's still clinging to the bottle. He says, they ask him, "Are you hurt?" "I don't know, don't think so, but be careful. There's enough damage has been done already without smashing this bottle. But hurry up, there are 3 of us in the house. There were 3 of us in the house and a dog. There, glug, 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 glug. That's it, now I can pass out." It's horrible to laugh at Captain Haddock's alcoholism, but it provides so much of the humor in the series. And Snowy manages to go back into the rubble and pull out Calculus's umbrella. He's very faithful. He's going to keep a hold of that umbrella as best as he can. And we see the overcoat and hat agents asking, "Are there any casualties?" And somebody says there were 3. 2 looked in very bad shape. And we see here a little excerpt from a newspaper, something that Herge does to give us some extra information. And we learn that police have detained 2 men found loitering in the vicinity of the crime, questioning passers-by. These 2 men will appear before the examining magistrate this morning. So we assume that it's these 2 men who are questioning the passers-by. And so we cut to a scene of the magistrate who tells the sergeant to bring them in, and we find it's not the 2 agents, but it is in fact our friends Thompson and Thompson, who are dressed in Swiss costume. And in fact, they say, "We're in Swiss disguise while we're searching for our friends Tintin and Haddock." And of course, they're going to blend naturally into the citizenry of Geneva, just like that. And before they can do anything, they end up in the hospital themselves. They're going to visit Captain Haddock and Tintin, who are just being released. And they end up in their own hospital beds after slipping on the shiny floor. This road here, I remember seeing this road alongside the lake as when we were visiting. So we learned from the Thompsons a few key bits of information. The man that was wounded at Marlinspike was Sildavian. And we also learned that Boris, Topolino's servant, was Bordurian. So we now have the idea that the Bordurians and Sildavians are both after Calculus and fighting each other to try to get to him. And that it must be the Bordurians who have him now. So Tintin finds where the Bordurian embassy is, and they travel out there at night. And here we have the beginning of a really of a long sequence, a chase sequence, which begins on the grounds of the Bordurian embassy as it faces the lake. And Haddock has his insect repellent, whatever you call these things. I love these. You know, this type of thing. We don't have these anymore, but it's such an iconic thing and so useful in cartooning. It's such a shame. This wouldn't make sense to modern readers. And as they're watching, they're rowing up to the embassy in a rowboat. As they're watching, they see that Calculus is being led out to a waiting helicopter, but then they see a second group of men rush the first group. And it looks as if someone's trying to rescue Calculus, so they decide to join in. The big brawl between blue overcoated Bordurian agents and their Sildavian counterparts, now all fighting. And Haddock says, how can we tell friends from enemies? And Tintin says, go for the ugliest. That won't be difficult, you'll see. He says, now, which has the ugliest mug? It looks about 50-50. So he bangs both their heads together. And he finds the man who was in Calculus's workspace and had knocked him out while he was there. And so he sprays him, gives him a face full of mosquito repellent before knocking him out. And Tintin thinks that he's assisting Calculus's rescuers as they head towards a waiting motorboat. But as he turns around to call for the captain, one of the Sildavian agents whacks him with a kosh. And before they motor away with Calculus, leaving Tintin there. Tintin and Haddock manage to get into the Bordurian's helicopter and go in pursuit of the motorboat. And as they're flying, Tintin tells Captain to get on the radio and try to get a hold of the police. As he's trying to radio, an amateur radio operator comes on the line, and it turns out to be Julian Wag, of course. He begins making himself a nuisance. Captain Haddock tries to get him to warn the police of what's happening, but of course Julian Wag is too interested in the sound of his own voice. So I just want to point out the color in this section as night transitions to morning. What a great job the colorists did here. The nighttime tones, and then as the sky begins to turn pink, and the color of the vehicles, the headlights. I mean, just a wonderfully effective use of the color here. Not expressionistic, but very naturalistic use of color. And also the vehicles. One really cool car, and even the helicopter. So they do not succeed in stopping the car which races on past them. And they cannot pursue them any further in the helicopter, which is run out of fuel. So they walk along the road, hoping to get picked up by hitchhiking. A black car goes by them. Calculus believes that it's the same black car the Bordurians have been using, and pulls Tintin into the nearby trees, lands in a pond. Tintin explains that even though it's a black Citroen, like the other car, it has French plates. The other one had Swiss plates. It begins to rain as they're walking, and after a while they realize that Snowy's been carrying Calculus's umbrella with him, and what fools they've been. And as they take the umbrella, the sun, of course, comes out and the rain stops. As they head into the next town, they, Haddock gets run over by an Italian motorist in his nice sports car. Another great car, by the way. But they ask him if he will help them go in pursuit of the Sildavian agents, and he is all for it. And as he guns the accelerator, Haddock flies back into the back seat. And off we go. So the chase continues. We see that this motorist is a bit of a maniac. As he's driving through the town, weaving through traffic. Great panel here of people covered in wet tar. And we come to another nice large panel, another kind of Where's Waldo-ish panel. We see the mayhem that's happening in this little town as the motorist drives through. He's stopped by a gendarme, and he says, "You barbarian going through a built-up area at that speed, you'll pay for this. Your name?" And he gives him his name. Arturo Benedetto Giovanni Giuseppe Pietro Arcangelo Alfredo Cartofoli da Milano. And so flusters the gendarme. He says, well, don't do it again. And off they go. Finally, they manage to gain on the car that they've been trying to pursue. And the Italian motorist rushes ahead of him, stopping him. The driver of the car gets out, very irate. They demand to look in his trunk. They open the trunk, and he says, "There, now, where's your coelacanth?" as he says, asking about their friend Calculus. So they're a bit embarrassed, and of course this embarrasses their Italian driver, who storms off in a rage that he's saying that they've lied to him. He's been misled. So as the cars drive off, they're now on their own once more, until Tintin realizes that that Calculus must have been under the back seat, which appeared a bit higher than it should have been. There must have been a fake back seat, and that's where he was hidden. On they go. They finally come to an airfield. Plane is landing. And there, in fact, they find the car again. The Chrysler, it is. And they realize that the plane is waiting for the people in the car, that they're going to unload Calculus and bring him into the car. In fact, that's what's happening. Tintin runs after them as they're getting into the plane. Almost is able to catch hold of the plane before it takes off. Great plane drawings. And runs right into a haystack. And we find poor Haddock has been strung up on a barbed wire fence. But they look in the car and they see that Tintin was right after all, that it was the space below the back seat, which is where Calculus was hidden. Back in Geneva, they read in the paper that a Sildavian plane has been intercepted by Bordurian fighters while flying over Bordurian territory, and so now they realize that Calculus is back in the hands of the Bordurians. Haddock wants to call home to see what's going on, make sure that everything is fine at Marlinspike, and of course, as he does, he gets through to Cuts the Butcher first. When he finally gets through to Marlinspike, he finds that Julian Wag has come to visit and has brought his family and has set himself up in Marlinspike Hall while Captain Haddock is away. So Tintin and Captain Haddock get tickets for a plane for Zuhod, which is the capital of Borduria. As they board the bus, Calculus's umbrella has now been lost along the way, and Snowy spies a gentleman. Wait, I like this this whole drawing, his stance, his attitude with his little cigarette holder and his bundle of flowers. You can imagine who he's waiting for, leaning on his umbrella. Snowy sees the umbrella, thinks it's Calculus's, of course, and snatches it away. Just as they board the bus, Tintin realizes this is not Calculus's umbrella. He sees the man chasing them. Captain throws it out. Back to him, hits him in the face. And now we begin another gag sequence. This is probably one of my favorite Captain Haddock humor sequences. So we begin, he's got this piece of, a Band-Aid or a bandage, sticking plaster is what they call it, on his nose. This is from the explosion at Topolino's chateau. Still got it on his nose. And he peels it off while they're on the bus, and he's not able to manage. He's trying to shake it off his hand. It finally flies off his hand and lands on the hat of the woman in front. There's a great few panels here where Haddock sees where it's landed and decides to hide behind his newspaper as the woman's husband, maybe not her husband. He says, "Pardon me, but you have something on your hat. There's a bit of sticking plaster." He says, "Now, where did that come from?" So now he's got it on his hand. Haddock peeking from behind his newspaper here is great. So this guy manages to shake it free. Haddock says, "Well, that's got rid of that." And we see that it's now back on Haddock's cap. So now they're on their plane. They're on the plane bound for Bordoria, and we see that Haddock is still dealing with the sticking plaster. He's found it on his cap, trying to shake it off. And as we see the time going by on the plane, the sticking plaster has managed to move from one passenger to the other. We see now it's here. Now it's made its way up into the cockpit. And meanwhile, the Bordorian agents are trying to warn their superior, the chief of police in Sohod, that Tintin and Haddock are on their way and that he should be prepared to receive them. So they land and they go to the airport. We see behind the Bordorian official in the airport here a little picture of the leader, Marshal Curvitash, the leader of Bordoria, with his distinctive mustache, which we see everywhere, from the circumflex over the letters in the Bordorian language to the little Nazi-style insignia on the armbands, and we'll see it all over the place. And actually, in the French language version, he was not called Curvitash. Curvitash is the English translators came up with that name. His name was Plexiglass, and we can just make out here on the bottom of his portrait that Plexiglass is still written there from the French version. And as they come in, they're asked to by an officer to come with him. And Tintin sees that the sticking plaster is still plaguing them, stuck to the back of Haddock's coat. And as they come in to greet the official there at the airport, the sticking plaster is now passed on to his hand. And he introduces the two Bordorian agents who will be their minders, their watchers during their stay in Bordoria. A great panel of the city of Zahod, which, you know, is drawn very much like one would imagine an Eastern Bloc kind of state. The statue of Marshal Kurvitash in the center there. So in King Ottokar's scepter, Bordoria was really an analog for Nazi Germany, and at this point it has transformed more into a Soviet-style dictator state, authoritarian state. And here we see the curvy, the mustache-style motif here, even on the fenders of the automobiles. As they get into their hotel, Haddock tells Tintin to hide quickly. Who is it coming by? But it is the opera singer, Bianca Castafiore. And I always wondered about his reaction here, because really, you know, Captain Haddock hasn't met her yet. He's encountered her in the 7 Crystal Balls. She's performing on stage, and he's in the audience. Tintin has met her once back in King Ottokar's scepter. And of course, she will become kind of a foil for Captain Haddock later on, especially in the Castafiore, what is it? The Castafiore Emerald. But his reaction here is a little, you know, I was kind of confused why he would have such a big reaction to her this early. Of course, she's much admired by the Bordorian agents. So Tintin realizes that, you know, they're being watched. Their phones are obviously bugged. He's trying to tell the captain that by not saying it directly. Captain Haddock doesn't get it. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And we see, of course, their conversations are being recorded. And we see that Captain Haddock still has the sticking plaster stuck to his hand. This is you know, the way that Herge is able to just draw a gag out over 3, 4, 5 pages like that. And here we are at dinner. It looks like, I always thought this woman here looked a lot like Mrs. I think Snowball was her name, from the Cigars of the Pharaoh. At the very end of that volume, when we meet the dinner party guests in the Indian bungalow. And I think it's Reverend Snowball and his wife, Mrs. Snowball. I'll have to check on that and maybe compare the pictures and see if I'm right. There's another person back here as well. This person here with the kind of the Groucho Marx mustache and cigar and eyebrows and glasses reminds me of the arms dealer from The Broken Ear. I can't remember his name now. So every once in a while I'll see characters and I wonder if Herge is recycling them, if he's, you know, putting them in there on purpose as little Easter eggs. So during dinner, Tintin's ploy is to get their minders drunk so that they can escape from them, and he does so rather easily. And he doesn't even have to try before one of the minders begins spilling the beans about calculus. But he tells him he doesn't know, that it's Sponge, the chief of the ZEP, the ZEP, or the secret police, is the only one who knows where calculus is. So they go up to their rooms, and as they go to their rooms, Tintin and Haddock lead the two agents into the rooms, which they believe is the corridor. He says, "Yes, I'll stay in the corridor. Fine, good idea." And then they lock them in the rooms. This is a great gag. And then one of them begins thumping on the door, and as Tintin opens it, they're afraid that they'll wake up the whole hotel with all that pounding. He says, the agent says, "Not gone to bed yet? I just wanted to give you your cap. Now I'll stay in the corridor. I'll be very comfortable. They've put a bed there." And he goes back in. And that takes care of those two. But they see that a couple other agents have been called in. The waiters tip them off that the two Zepp agents have gotten blindingly drunk. Disgustingly drunk, he says, and that's why I telephoned the Zepp immediately. You did well. All the exits are guarded, so now they need to get out of the hotel. This panel here of Tintin and Haddock climbing down the fire escape is reproduced in Brussels on one of the murals. So if you go to Brussels, one of the things about the town is there are murals all over town paying homage to many of the comics characters that the Brussels was responsible in large part with Herge for the franco-belgian comic scene, and Brussels being sort of the center of that. There are murals all over town of many of the comics characters in French and Belgian comics, and this here is reproduced on a wall in the town. I remember seeing it, took a picture of it, I think, when I was there. So Tintin and Haddock managed to escape the police. We see more of the automobiles with the curvy-tash fenders. And then we cut to a scene, a gathering of Bordurian officials all watching a demonstration of this new weapon that that utilizes sound for destructive effect. And they're watching on a screen as what is described as a great transatlantic city, which he says is superfluous to name. And at the touch of a button, down it comes. And everybody is amazed. Extraordinary, splendid, amazing. Here among the crowd we see Colonel Spons. And then it's revealed that it's just a model that they've seen, a working model, a miniature version of a weapon that they're still working on perfecting, but in no time at all. It will be able to destroy at long range, not just glass and china, but bricks, concrete, and steel. And this will give them the power of world dominance once they have this weapon that they've kidnapped Calculus for in order to develop for them. Spons gets a call that Tintin and Haddock have escaped, but they must still be trapped in the area. So he heads over to the opera house. He says that he'll check out Castafiore. He'll go hear Castafiore while he's waiting. And of course, that's where Tintin and Haddock are, in the opera house. And Haddock is falling asleep, having a tough time waking up. And as they go out into the intermission, through the crowd comes Spons and his officers, and they pass by just within inches of Tintin and Haddock. And at the end of the show, Tintin and Haddock realize that all the exits are being blocked by policemen, so they decide to slip out through the stage door. And as they go backstage, they are accosted by Bianca Castafiore, who recognizes Tintin and comes over to invite them back into her dressing room. And here we have the beginning of what's going to be a running gag of her not getting Captain Haddock's name right. And of course, when he's introduced to her, he flubs his own name. He's either starstruck by her or nervous for some reason. He says, Haddock, Haddad, excuse me, Haddock. And from this point on, she'll never get his name right. She calls him Mr. Paddock. She says, "It's Haddock, madam." There's a knock at the door, and her maid, Irma, comes in to inform her that Colonel Spans, the chief of police, wishes to pay his respects to her. They explain that they're trying to avoid him, but she finds it all very exciting and is up to help them, so hides them behind a curtain in her room. And as Spans comes in, they are able to eavesdrop on their conversation, in which he reveals that he talks very freely with her and reveals that he has the orders to release Calculus. If they so wish, he has the orders in his overcoat pocket. And of course, his overcoat has been placed in the closet right next to Tintin and Haddock as they're hiding in there. Spans is based on Herge's brother, who was originally the physical model for Tintin himself, in particular his little quiff of hair, his cowlick. And at some point, apparently, Herge's brother had to suffer through, being ridiculed. He was a career army officer, and he became known as Major Tintin by his compatriots whenever they would ridicule him. And he, understandably got kind of tired of that, and began adopting this look more like the famous director Erich von Stroheim, with the shaved head and the monocle. And so Herge once again used him as the model for this new villain, Colonel Spans. So Colonel Spans reveals to Castafiore where Calculus is being held. He's in the fortress of Bachin, along with the fact that the orders for his release are in Colonel Spans's pocket, his coat pocket. And he says that tomorrow he'll have to choose. Either he gives up his plans or he'll never be heard of again. And Castafiore says that supposing that he does give up his plans, what happens then when he gets home? And he tells everybody about it. Spans says, "Oh, I've foreseen that. If we set the professor free, it will be in the presence of 2 representatives of the International Red Cross, and he'll have to declare in front of them that he came to Verduria of his own free will to offer us his plans." And he says that I have the passes for these 2 representatives in my coat as well. So Tintin and Haddock now have everything they need. The information where Calculus is and the means by which they will be able to free him. So the next morning at the fortress of Bachin, the 2 representatives of the Red Cross show up with the orders for Calculus's release. And we see it's obviously Tintin and Haddock in disguise. Disguises they've managed to get, conveniently enough, by being backstage at the Opera House. But they're startled to find that the officer is now going to phone up Colonel Spans to verify that everything is on the line. Colonel Spans is not there. He just gets through to his assistant, who says, yes, that's right. Those passes and the order are legit. And so the officer at the fortress clears them to go and take Calculus. Spans returns and finds out everything has happened too late. Calculus and Haddock have already driven out of the fortress. So now we have our last big chase of the story. At first, they're being pursued by officers on motorcycles, which they manage to elude by unbuttoning the canvas top, convertible top of the car. But then they find ahead of them a tank is waiting, blocking the road. They lose control of the car as they try to jam on the brakes, sending them over the side of the hill. The tank approaches. The soldiers jump out of the tank in pursuit of the three down the hill. And here we have our cover illustration. And again, I mentioned the scene. There's a similar scene that happens in the Broken Ear, and I think in King Ottokar's Scepter. I'll have to go back and take a look at those again and see if I'm right. But it seems like this motif of pursuers running down a wooded hill in search of Tintin has happened a few times. And as he does in the Broken Ear, where he manages to slip up and take the car of the soldiers, Haddock and Tintin and Calculus run up and manage to jump in the tank and make off with that. And of course, Spans is going out of his head as he's getting updates on what's happening. And then we see a string of good luck for Tintin and company in their tank. At first, some anti-tank artillery backfires somehow. One of the officers says, "I always told you this make of gun could be improved." And then as they head towards a road full of mines laid out in front of them, they run over them, but they find that they're all duds. And the soldier on the side of the road says, "By the whiskers of Curvy Tash, you unloaded all that dud stuff on me. It's sabotage." It's a little implausible, but still okay for the humor of the sequence. And they find what looks like explosives inside the tank, and Tintin says that they're thunder flashes used on exercises. When you light them, they explode with a terrific bang. He says, great snakes, it can't be true. They're headed towards the frontier, so it looks like they're going to make it. They manage to plow through the building of the Bedouin side, and in celebration, Haddock lights up his pipe, tosses back his match, setting off the thunder flashes inside the tank, just as the, I guess it must be the Swiss. Now are they on the Swiss border? I'm not sure where the geography of, what the geography of Bordeaux is like, where it adjoins Switzerland, if it does. Anyway, they're on friendly territory now. And back in Geneva, they go to a lost and found and manage to find Calculus's umbrella. Calculus is relieved to find it. He says that the plans for his weapon have been hidden in the handle of his umbrella, but as they take off the handle, he finds that they're gone. And Haddock is finished. He's had it. He says, I've had it. I've had all I can take. You've been rescued, but your plans, they can look after themselves. I want to go home to a little peace and quiet. And so back he goes to Marlinspike, finally. And as he walks in the door, he's greeted. Gets hit in the face with a ball. And then he slips on a toy train. And he finds that Julian Wag has been making himself at home along with his entire family. They've invaded Marlinspike. He says, so I said, Julian, don't you waste the end of your holiday. And your little place was vacant, so I popped in for a few days with my little brood. What a mess they've made. Poor Nestor here with his Indian headdress on, being forced to be a horse, I guess. And then one last cry off panel. Here, quickly, it's Calculus. He went straight up to his room, and he shows that he left the microfilm back in his room at Marlinspike, that he never had it the whole time. It was never in his umbrella. And now he decides that the only thing to do is to destroy it so that nobody will ever get their hands on this terrible weapon that he's invented. And as he goes to lean into Captain Haddock's lit match, up the thing goes in flames, singeing Haddock's hair and his beard. As Haddock is screaming at him, he says, "My nerves won't stand much more of you. Every time I settle down, up pops trouble, you flaming jack-in-the-box." Calculus doesn't hear him right. He says, "Chicken pox? At your age? Goodness. Chicken pox. But that's very serious." As he runs into Julian, "Say, old chum, I've just thought of something. All that clutter in all your laboratory, is it insured?" "Oh, I'm very well, thank you. But I'm very worried about the captain. He has chicken pox." "Chicken pox? Well, that's nice for him. Chicken pox. Ha ha ha. Better go live in a hen coop. Ha ha. Chicken pox. Ha ha ha. Chicken pox? But that's infectious. Chicken pox is." And so out he drags his family. And we have our the end panel with Snowy and the Siamese cat finding a moment of peace between themselves as we watch the Wag clan leave the grounds. And we come to the end of this episode of Reading Tintin. And join me next time when we read The Red Sea Sharks. Thank you for joining me.